Last week we talked a little bit about, we talked a lot about the location of Bezek in the first battle as it's described in the beginning of the book of Shoftim. Yehuda leads, and the way we interpreted the story, there's two ways to look at the story. Either this is Judah's conquest of the southern cities of his territory and a sort of a repeat of the events as they appear in the book of Yoshua, although this battle with Bezek doesn't, and Adoni Bezek does not appear there. Or, as we suggested, it's actually a new campaign that's post the death of Yeshua and is taking place in the north. Bezek, as we have it today, in the area of the Shomron, in the area of the north, near Gilboa, and that a major campaign in an attempt or an effort of the Canaanites to kind of reassert themselves after the death of Yeshua, and the need for Yehuda to lead a campaign against the city of Bezek and the king Adoni Bezek. In that regard, in either of those interpretations, we said was acceptable. In that regard, we have this conversation between Yehuda and Shimon. And it's the story of Shimon that I want to pick up on this evening and kind of rehash a little bit of what we did in Yeshua, some new information, kind of just devote our study this evening to the status of the tribe of Shimon. It's a fascinating story and somewhat of a tragic one, but nonetheless, it also is a reflection or a window into the themes of the book of Shoftim. There's a reason why the story of the partnership between Yehuda and Shimon is recorded here at the beginning of Shoftim, even though it's really a relevant issue to the book of Yoshua. And we looked at it in our study of Yoshua. But it's repeated here, and it's repeated here for good reason, and that's what we're going to explore. So Yehuda, when he starts this campaign against Bezek, whether in the north or in the south, doesn't matter for our purposes now, he turns to Shimon Achiv, Vayom Yehuda Shimon Achiv, and he says to Shimon, his brother, Alei iti b'gorali v'nilachama b'kna'ani v'halachti gam ani itcha b'goralecha. Shimon, you come with me in my fight against the Canaanites, and I will go with you in your territory, in your lot. And so Vayelech ito Shimon, and so Shimon does. And the rest of this battle we talked about last week. I'm not going to study that which we did last week, but I want to jump forward after the battle with Adoni Bezek from really from Pasuk Chet and on. This certainly is a repeat of a description of the battle of Yehuda in the south from Sefer Yoshua. This we saw in chapter 15, again in chapter 19 of Yoshua. Yehuda begins the campaign of the south, in the tribal territory of Yehuda, starts with Yerushalayim, which is the northernmost point of the tribe of Judah, and then he heads southward. And he heads south into the hills and into the south lowland countries, region. And the story of his conquest of Hebron and Caleb and Othniel ben Kenaz and Caleb, all of that is in verbatim in Sefer Yeshua. I'm going to skip it for now. And then we get to Pasuk Tet Zayin of Keni Choten Moshe. That too I'm going to skip for now. We'll come back to it. It's important, but I want to look at it subsequently. And then we get to Pasuk Yud Zayin. After Yehuda finishes, or it's the middle of this campaign of the south, Vayelech Yehuda et Shimon Achiv. As promised, Judah then goes with Shimon into his cities. What are his cities? This Tzfat is not modern Tzfat in the north of Israel. This Tzfat is in the south, and they destroy the city of Tzfat. They call it Chorma. Vayilkod Yudat Azavet Kvula et Ashkelon vet Kvula et Ekron vet Kvula, cities we are well familiar with from the territory that will later become known as Eretz Plishtim, Aza, Ashkelon, Ekron, Ashkelon and Ekron. Vayi Hashem et Yehuda God was with him, and he's able to conquer, for the most part, the area of the hills, but not the valley, because the valley was never conquerable by Israel because of the chariots of the local Canaanites, and gives Hebron to Kalev, and the rest of the story continues from there. So there are two references to Shimon in this chapter. One at the very beginning, by Yom Yehuda Shimon Achiv Alei Ti B'Goali Halachti Gamani Itcha B'Goalecha. You come with me in my battles, and I will join you in your battles. And then again in Pasuk Zayin, the flip side of it, where Yehuda joins Shimon. Yehuda et Shimon Achiv. That really takes us back into the story of the tribal territory of Shimon as it appears in Sefer Yehoshua. And what makes Shimon unique is that Shimon, amongst all the tribes of Israel, is not given his own territory or region in the land. He is given cities within the tribal territory of Judah. And then I showed you the psukim last week. We're going to look at them again here. In Yehoshua Perek Yud Tet, when the land of Israel is divided by tribes, and in the latter part of Yehoshua, each goral, each lot, each territory is identified. Where are the cities of Shimon? Shimon, the lot that was cast, the territory that was ascribed to Shimon, lemateh b'nei Shimon lemishpachatam, v'hi nachalatam b'toch nachalat b'nei Yehuda. Their territory was inside the inheritance, inside the territory of Judah. In other words, it's really cities that belong to Yehuda, to Judah, but Judah, whether by choice or whether not by choice, gave those cities to Shimon, much along the lines of the deal that was solidified at the beginning of Sefer Shoftim. You fight with me, and I will give you, or I will fight with you. We'll share this battle, and therefore share the cities that were so associated. V'ilem b'nachalatan Be'er-Sheva, V'Sheva, and Chatzar Shual, and the names of the cities that are listed here. There's Choma, which we just read about. The city of Tzfat became the city of Choma. Tziklag, which is very famous from the story of David HaMelech and his family settled in Tziklag. In the end of Sefer Shmuel, we have a story about the city of Tziklag, Shmuel Aleph, and these are the names of the cities, and some region around there as well. We'll see what that means as well. So the question that I wanted to address in the shir tonight is, why is it that the tribal territory of Shimon is not its own region, its own land, its own territory, as is every other shevet in amongst the tribes of Israel, with the exception of Levi, because of their status as the workers of the Mikdash. They have a special elevated status, Hashem Nachalatam. God is their portion. They're given cities by all the tribes throughout the land of Israel, but they're given 48 cities. That's a major accomplishment. Here we're given 5, 6, 7 cities in total to the tribe of Shimon. And if you look at the map, this map doesn't have it. This is not a good map. The map that I shared with you on the source page is better. There's a small version of it here, and then I realized it was too small to read, so I gave it to you on the second page. You have the full map, but I'll show it to you here. More or less, every tribe has its own region: Reuven, Ephraim, Dan, Menashe, Zvulun, Yisachar. Every tribe has its own area. Shimon, this dark green, if you will, is essentially a way of saying this tribal territory of Shimon is essentially a handful of cities from Judah that are given to Shimon. And they don't even stay tribal cities of Shimon. We'll see in a few minutes that they become, at some point or another, Judah settles in them. David HaMelech settles in Tziklag. Before he's David HaMelech, right? When he's David running from Shaul, he settles in the city of Tziklag, even though Tziklag was given to the tribe of Shimon. So even though these cities, here's Choma, even though these cities are assigned to Shimon, they don't stay that way either. They were eventually even subsumed into the tribal territory of, or tribal cities of Judah. What is it about Shimon that kind of gave them the lot of cities of Judah that were given to them, gifted to them, assigned to them, but they don't get their own territory? Why not? And for this, I want to come back to something which we looked at in our study of Sefer Yeshua briefly, and that is we didn't study briefly. I'm going to address it briefly today, and that is the relationship between how they traveled through the desert and how the land of Israel was allocated to the tribes. If you remember, when we kind of looked at the whole overview of the tribes of Israel, of where each tribe was given, right, this layout of the tribes is actually a reflection of something that starts in Chumash. And that's where our study of what happened to Shimon begins, because really the question is twofold. Why was Shimon given cities inside the tribe of Judah? And second of all, was that a punishment? Was that just luck of the draw? If it was a punishment, did they have their own territory that they were supposed to be in? Did they lose it? Where would it have been? What's the story of Shevet Shimon? That's our question for this evening, or this afternoon. So if we go back to Bamidbar Perek Bet, chapter 2 in Bamidbar lists the encampments, as they traveled through the desert. And if you remember how we analyzed it, there are essentially four banners, four degalim, and they divide all the 12 tribes up into four groups of 3 tribes each. And they, in structure, just to kind of give you a quick picture of it, these are the same psukim. I'm going to read them from here in a minute, and I'll translate them, but I'll show them to you in Chumash. And they essentially create this kind of structure as they travel through the desert. The Mishkan was always in the middle of their encampment, and then there were 4 banners or 4 groups of tribes on each side of the Mishkan. Those 4 banners, Ish al diglo, v'otot levet avatam, each household, each family, each tribe, according to their banner, Yachanu b'nei Yisrael, that's how they would encamp around the Mishkan, misaviv l'ol moed. So that's the structure of the camp. And then the Torah lists the camps. Now I color-coded this in order to make it a little easier to see. Hachanim kedma mizracha, on the east side of the Mishkan, was the degel of the tribe of Judah, degel Machane Yehuda. And the banner, the degel, the group of the tribe of Judah, consisted of 2 subgroups, namely the tribe of Yisachar and the tribe of Zvulun. And together, Yehuda, Yisachar, and Zvulun comprised the eastern degel around the Mishkan. Is everybody following this structure? We did this in Yeshua. I'm just doing a quick review. Similarly, the degel on the south side of the Mishkan, degel Machane Reuven Temana, is the tribal group banner of Reuven, and with him is the tribes of Shimon and Gad. Now, this also had a census. This also had numbers associated with it. They did a complete count of all the soldiers in the army. We'll come to those numbers in a little while. But the southern banner was Reuven, Shimon, and Gad. Then the Mishkan itself, V'nasa o moed machane Leviim, the Mishkan was in the middle. And then you had 2 additional camps. You had the banner of the Machane of Ephraim, the camp of Ephraim, who led the tribal banner of Ephraim together with on the west side of the Mishkan, together with the tribes of Menashe and Binyamin. And finally, Degel Machane Dan Safona in the north was the tribal banner of Dan, together with the tribes of Asher and Naphtali. And so those are the 4 groups of tribes as they encircled the Mishkan. We spent some time trying to figure out how this division was done, sons of Rachel, sons of Leah, sons of Bilhah, Zilpah mixed into the group. Not my issue for now, other than to recognize that there are essentially four groups: Yehuda with Yisachar and Zvulun, Reuven with Shimon and Gad, Ephraim with Menashe and Binyamin, and Dan with Asher and Naphtali. The other thing we observed was that this structure, as they come to the land of Israel, this structure gets sorry, I just make sure I don't get ahead of myself. This structure, as they march through the desert, is essentially the same pattern, more or less, with some changes, as to how the tribes were assigned their placement in the land of Israel. So with a certain exception, okay? So essentially, if I take, other than the fact that Yehuda and Reuben switch places, Yehuda, instead of being on the east side of the Mishkan, ends up being in the southern part of the land of Israel. Ephraim, which if I flip Yehuda and Reuben, then I end up flipping Ephraim and Dan also in order to keep the same structure. And if you look at Asher and Naphtali, the tribe of Dan, or the banner of Dan, Asher and Naphtali are here together in the north. Look at Menashe and Binyamin, they're here together in the center of the country. If you look at, we'll come to Reuven, Shimon, and Gad in a second, but certainly Reuven and Gad are together on the east side of the Jordan, and Yisachar and Zvulun are together, although they're in the north, and Judah is in the south. They're the only tribe that is split. And one of the explanations we gave for why Yehuda, Yisachar, Zvulun is split is because, and that has to do with this next slide, if you will, in that if I replace the Mishkan with the tribe that housed the Mikdash or the Mishkan, which was Binyamin, Binyamin is described as the tribe of the Shechina, then Yedid Hashem Shechen sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself. Devarim, I don't have the psukim here. The Binyamin Amar, Moshe's bracha to Binyamin, Yedid Hashem, beloved of God, Yishkon levetach alav, God's presence dwells upon Binyamin all day long. Chofef alav kol hayom, God hovers over him, covers him, protects him, uven ktefav shechen, and dwells between his shoulders. We talked a little bit about the shoulders and the geography of the tribe as well. I'm not going to rehash that now. But if I look at Binyamin here as the center replacement of the Mikdash or the Mishkan or the Shechina, then the four banners that surrounded the Mishkan on all sides, Reuven, Ephraim, Dan, and Yehuda, they are the tribes that end up surrounding Binyamin. Judah in the south, Dan in the west, Ephraim in the north, Reuven to the east. And so the layout in the land of Israel more or less matches the banners as they march through the desert. Is that clear? That's a kind of a quick rehash of something we studied in Sefer Yehoshua. If you were there if you were with us when we studied Yehoshua, this should be review. If not, then hopefully it's understandable.
Let me ask a question.
Yeah.
I thought when I learned Sefer Yehoshua that the land was designated by lots.
So we talked about that also. It was a combination of Yaakov setting out the general geography of each tribe and their territory. The layout of the tribes is set out by Yaakov in his brachas to Bnei Israel. That's the purpose of Yaakov's brachas. Moshe reiterates it, makes a couple of minor changes to it. The purpose of the lot is only to confirm which cities, the land, the cartography that Yehoshua sends out spies, or he sends out cartographers, if you will, to literally write out the cities, the territory, and bring it all back to the Mishkan, in which a goral was then used to give it a kind of a stamp of approval. So the goral did not assign the tribes their territory. The goral simply gave it a divine approval to the layout that was set out by Yaakov, by Moshe, and by the tribes themselves. So no, the goral was not to assign the land. The goral was to kind of stamp the division. And this layout, more or less, is already in place by Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov, in his blessings to his children, one of the great mysteries as to what Yaakov does in his blessings, we'll come back to this in a second, is to assign the tribes where they would be, more or less, by general geography and topography of the land. Based on this assessment and the division of the Degalim, we have a fairly good idea of where the tribe of Shimon was supposed to be. Where the tribe of Shimon was supposed to be. Because the tribe of Shimon was part of which banner?
Reuven.
Reuven. Clearly. Degel Machane Reuven, the banner of the tribe of Reuven was Reuven, Shimon, and Gad. That was the group, that was the trio. And so the question becomes, if Reuven and Gad are together here on the east side of the Yarden, where was the tribe of Shimon? Now, there are two parts to this mystery of where the tribe of Shimon is. And one part of that mystery, I'll show you in a second, one part of that mystery goes back to Yaakov. Yaakov and his blessings to his children, as I mentioned before, Yaakov and his blessings to his children, the end of Bereshit, kind of goes through it's a big question, what is Yaakov trying to do in this blessing? He kind of blesses some and critiques others. What is he trying to do? But more or less, he's assigning land to the tribes. To the tribe of Judah, he assigns the land that is full of vines, vines and grapes, right? Which is essentially the area of the hills of Judah. Zevulun l'chof yamim yishkon. Zevulun Yaakov places at the coast, right? And he will dwell amongst the sea dwellers. And he will harbor ships all the way up to Sidon in Lebanon. Yisachar, who is sitting in the valley of Emek Yisrael, Chamor Garim, is like a strong donkey, Rovetz ben Mishpatayim, stubbornly lying between the borders or between the hills of the valley of Emek Yisrael, because it was very important territory. And so on and so forth. Each one of the tribes is given an area. We will look at the connection between Yaakov's brachos and each of the tribes a little bit later in our study of chapter 1, because it has to do with where they were placed in the land of Israel. Well, let's go back to Shimon. Where was Shimon placed? If that's true, right? If the allocation starts with Yaakov's brachos, where was Shimon placed? Let's go back to the bracha of Reuven and Shimon and Levi. Reuven is the Bechor. He is therefore entitled to the double portion. The double portion is taken away from Reuven because of the events related to Bilhah, not a subject for today, but that's essentially the purpose of Yaakov's bracha to Reuven. You are my Bechor. You should have been entitled to a double portion, but because of the story of Pachas Kamayim Maltata, your rash, quick anger, etc., the story of Bilhah, you defiled my couch, you lost that double portion, it went to Yosef. Shimon v'Levi achi, Shimon and Levi brothers. However, their violence was their weapon. And he critiques them for their events related to the story of Shechem. And so he says, in their council, let my soul not come, in their assembly, let me not be joined, because of the way they killed a man. Arur apam ki az ve'evrata ki kashata, their anger should be cursed. Achalkem beYaakov, va'afitzem b'Yisrael. I will divide them in Yaakov. I will disperse them in Israel. Which means what? And the Mefarshim have a huge discussion. What does that mean? So most of the Mefarshim simply took it simply as I will separate Shimon and Levi so that they shouldn't dwell together. But that's not, that was never how the meaning that Shimon and Levi would dwell together or dwell in tribal territories next to each other, right? So the simpler explanation is that I don't want to let the tribe of Shimon or the tribe of Levi have one contiguous territory. I'm going to divide them up, disperse them in the tribes of Israel, and not give them their own land. And so essentially, from this perspective, what I'm suggesting is that Yaakov takes away the tribal territory of Shimon, and he takes away the tribal territory of Levi. Now, Levi redeems himself. How does Levi redeem himself? In the aftermath of the story of Chet HaEgel, the sin of the golden calf, Levi redeems himself by standing with Moshe and willing to fight to protect the integrity of the Jewish people. And so Levi is given the elevated status of working in the temple. So from that perspective, Levi he still gets divided. Yaakov divided them up. But Levi's territory now is the fact that Yaakov divides them, afitzem b'Yisrael, I will scatter them, disperse them in all of Israel. For Levi, it now means that he's going to be given 48 cities scattered and dispersed throughout the land of Israel, but assigned and donated by the tribes of Israel as a kind of an elevated status. Shimon, on the other hand, remains Shimon. And the question becomes, what happens to Shimon over the course of time? One of the interesting things that we see in terms of the brachos, and I'll just mention this briefly, what Yaakov does in his brachos, which is to divide the land of Israel according to the tribes, Moshe Rabbeinu does in his final brachot to the people as well. Moshe also identifies where each tribe will go. He moves some of the tribes around. So some of the tribes that were assigned by Yaakov to one part, like Dan in the coast, Moshe gives Dan tribal territory in the north, Yizanek min Bashan, and other such changes, a couple of changes. To Levi, Moshe says, the Urim Betumim would go to the one who was loyal to you, you tested and strove for you at Memriva, etc. And therefore, they will be assigned the status, Yaakov, to teach your laws, to teach your ordinances, to be the ones to serve in the temple. Fine. Bracha 2, go through the list of the tribes. He starts with Reuven. Reuven should be given a special status. He should live in Attai. Reuven is on the border. Reuven is on the outskirts of the land. He's surrounded by enemies. He gives him a special bracha. Gives a bracha to Yehuda. Gives a bracha to Levi. Gives a bracha to Binyamin. A bracha to Yosef, Ephraim and Menashe. A bracha to Zvulun. A bracha to Yisachar. A bracha to Asher. A bracha to Gad. He gives a bracha and to Dan and to Naphtali. He gives a bracha to every tribe. There's one tribe missing in Yaakov's brachos to the tribes of Israel. There is no bracha to Shimon. He's simply left out of the chapter. He does not appear.
Except he's hidden.
He's hidden. Where is he hidden?
Shema.
Right. He's hidden in Judah. So that's a drasha. Right? And that's true. I think it's true. I think it's a drasha that's correct. V'zot liyuda v'yomar Shema Hashem kol Yehuda. Okay, so Shimon is given a kind of a reference to it. If I was Shimon, I'd be highly insulted by that reference. Right? Because it comes from what happens later in the tribe of later in Sefer Yeshua, because Judah said to Yeshua, you know what, come fight to Shimon, come fight with me in my battles, and I'll donate to you a couple of cities. So because of that, the bracha to Yehuda is Vayom Shema Hashem kol Yehuda. That's an after the fact Rasha. Might be true, but it's an after the fact Rasha. What happened to Shimon? Where was he supposed to be, and why was his tribal territory taken away? So for Yaakov, I understand why he was sort of challenged and told that he would be dispersed. But Levi was able to redeem himself from that curse. What happened to Shimon in that regard? And where should Shimon's tribal territory have been? So the answer to that question, I think, is very clear. Where we would expect Shimon to be is together with Reuben and Gad. I have no reason to assume otherwise. Degel Machane Reuven, the tribal banner of Reuven, is the tribe of Reuven, Shimon, and Gad. So why is Shimon not here? What happened? To understand this, I want to take us back to another part of the story in which Shimon and in which Reuven and Gad appear. Where else do we encounter Reuven and Gad as a kind of a pair rather than a trio?
Oh, when
With
they
the
want to
man to
stay.
with the man Moshe, with the man to Moshe, who have in the other side of the Jordan River,
Right. With the request to remain on the east side of the Jordan. Correct? And if you look at the parak, that's in Bamidbar Parak Lamed Hey. Reuven and Gad were shepherds. They had great livestock. And they saw the territory that had been conquered from Sichon as very fertile. They saw this area. And they come to Moshe and they come to Elazar and they say, okay, of all these cities, they're fertile land for livestock. We have a lot of livestock. You want to stay? Now, there's a lot of discussion about what happened to Menashe. Menashe is added to this conversation at the end, and we talked about Menashe and why they're added at the very end. But I'm less interested for now as to why Menashe is added. Menashe doesn't appear in this conversation at all. But what does appear is Reuven and Gad. But what's interesting about the way Reuven and Gad are described is every reference to one or the other to the tribes is always Livnei Reuven, Livnei Gad, Livnei Gad, Livnei Reuven. Miknei Ravaya Livnei Reuven, Livnei Gad. Vayavo Bnei Gad, Bnei Reuven. And they say, Vayamru, etc. Moshe responds, Vayoma Moshe. It doesn't say Vayoma Moshe lahem. Moshe said to them. It says, Vayoma Moshe, Livnei Gad, Livnei Reuven. He scolds them, he critiques them, he thinks they want to stay out of the war, he gets very angry. And their response, is, no, we're going to fight, etc. I'll show you an interesting observation. Did I ever show you this website? It's called this Tanakh Lab. This website, alatorah.org, it's just kind of a sidebar. It's a fascinating website. It has something called a Ma'abadat Tanakh. You can take any chapter in Tanakh anywhere and get a kind of an accounting, simple math, numbers. How many times this word appears, how many times that word appears. It's interesting. The word Reuven, the name Reuven, appears in this text 7 times in the conversation between Moshe and those tribes. Right? The name God also appears 7 times. That's not a surprise because they're always together. Moshe speaks, God. Gad of Reuven come to Moshe. Moshe responds to God and to Reuven. And then at the end, Moshe, they said to Moshe, we will do as you command us, we will build, etc., and we will go and we will fight. Moshe says to them, if you will do this, if you will cross the Jordan and fight the rest of the tribes of Israel. And then Reuven responded and said, and then Moshe, etc. How many times do I have to repeat Reuven and Gad? Just say the tribes. They said to Moshe, Moshe said to them. It's as if I can't mention this story, I can't mention the them without separating out Reuven and Gad. Only Reuven and Gad are part of this conversation. Reuven and Gad, over and over and over again. Why? Because there's a tribe missing. There's a tribe missing. And the tribe that's missing is Shimon. Reuven and Gad is not a group. Reuven and Gad are never together in any part of the story of Tanakh. Reuven and Gad are together because they come as a degel, as a banner of those who walk together in the midbar. Degel Machane Reuven is Reuven, Shimon, and Gad. If it had been Reuven, Shimon, and Gad, the pasuk would have said, "Vayavo Degel Machane Reuven." The banner of Reuven, the tribe, the group of Reuven came to speak to Moshe. Reuven, Gad, and Shimon. But Shimon is not in this story. And Shimon's not in this story is not an accident. Because that's exactly what the tribal territory of Shimon was supposed to be. Reuven, Gad, and Shimon. Shimon is removed from this conversation. Why? Why? So Reuven is removed from this conversation. And the answer, and I think this isn't the Medrash Chiddush, this is a conversation, this appears in the Mefarshim as well. The answer is that Shimon is out of this conversation because they lose the right to their territory. When did they lose the right to their territory? When did they lose the right?
With the story of Zimri.
Correct.
Zimri ben Salu.
100%.
Baal
The
Peor.
story of Baal Peor. The story of Baal Peor, Shimon violates the fundamental condition upon which they were given the land of Israel. What's the connection between the story of Baal Peor and Shimon? That we'll take a look at now. Story of Shimon, or the story of Baal Peor, starts in Bamidbar Perek Chaf Hei. Now, understand the context of Bamidbar Perek Chaf Hei. It's the end of Parshat Balak. So, just to kind of do an overview of the story of Chumash, in Parshat Chukat, right? There's the Parshat of Bamidbar is Chukat Balak Pinchas. So Parshat Chukat, they conquered the territory of Sichon and Og, the entire western bank of the eastern bank of the Jordan River is conquered between the Yarden and the Yabok and the Arnon rivers, is conquered from the tribal territory from the king of the Amorite king Sichon. That's in Parshat Chukat. Then we have this kind of aside of Bilam and Balak and their conversation about Israel. And then at the end, we come back to the story of Israel. Right? So there's a break. Parshat Chukat ends with the conquest of the land of Sichon. Then we have we open up a sidebar, open parentheses. There's a conversation going on between Balak, king of Moab, and Bilam out there in the hills we don't even know about. Right? That's the end of that's Pasuk Chav Daled, conversation between Bilam and Balak. So now we'll go back to the story. So we just conquered the territory of Sichon. Reuven and Gad haven't yet come to request that territory. You want to see where I'm building? The end of Parshat Chukat, they conquered the territory of Sichon. They're now sitting in the eastern bank of the Jordan. Skip all the Parshat Balak because it's a sidebar. It's happening in parallel. It's off there in the side. Let's go back to the story. Vayeshev Yisrael b'Shittim. So Israel are now in a Shittim. Shittim is in the tribal territory of Sichon. Right? It's in this area here, in the area conquered from Sichon. Israel is in Shittim. Vayachal ha'am liznot al benot Moab. The people begin to have illicit relations with the daughters of Moab. The juxtaposition to Parshat Balak leads the Medrash to link the story to Bilam, as if Bilam gave Balak a suggestion to entice Israel into this. But if I leave Bilam and Balak out of the conversation, they're off on the sides, and I just look from Parshat Chukat to the beginning of this parsha. Vayeshev Yisrael b'Shittim. They're sitting in Shittim. V'yachalam is not upon and Israel begins to be enticed by the daughters of Moab. They called them, the people, meaning the daughters of Moab, enticed them to bring zevach, offerings to their gods. They began to eat together, and they bowed to their gods together. And they became drawn into the idolatry of Baal Peor. One suggested, or he talked once about the idolatry of Baal, the Canaanite idolatry of Baal, which is a fertility god of rain. Typically, you worshipped gods, in pagan gods, in manners that were reflective of the deity and what it represented. So if Baal was a fertility god, then the method by which it was worshipped usually involved some kind of sexuality, and hence why it was so immoral. God was angry at Israel. Moshe, take the chiefs of the people, hang them before God. God's anger will be appeased. Or God says to the judges, go and kill all the people who are guilty of this idolatry of Baal. And then you have this very horrible story about one particular person who we don't necessarily yet know who it is, who takes a Midianite daughter, and again, it's part of the ritual of Baal. It's part of the idolatry of Baal, this act of sexuality. But he does so in public, and everybody's crying. They don't know what to do with themselves. Until Pinchas decides to take matters into his own hands. He gets up from among the congregation. He takes a spear. And he stabs them and he kills them both. And thereby he stops the Magifa. We're not told yet who it is. We're just told this is what happened. But we are also told that 24,000 people died in that plague. Then we have the postscript to the story, which appears in the beginning of Parshat Pinchas, which is that Pinchas is praised for what he did. It's not an issue for now. And we are then told who the people are. Shem Ish Yisrael Mukasher Ukata Midyanit Zimri ben Salu Nasi Bet Av Shimoni. The man was the tribe leader of the house of Shimon, prince of this amongst the Nasi of the house of Shimon, and the Misham Midyanit Kozbi Batzor. I'm less interested in who she is as much as I am interested in who he is. And suddenly, Nasibit Av Shimoni. Why is that relevant information suddenly? So there's another piece to this puzzle. Who are the 24,000 people who died? 24,000 people died in this plague. Who were they? We don't know. Until we come to the next part of the story, literally next chapter, God says to Moshe, to Lazar, go ahead, okay, let's recount the people. New census. Okay, so now we're back to Bamidbar Perek Bet, which was and Perek Aleph, which was the census the first time around. Now we have a census the second time around. Now, I'm not going to bore you with all the numbers. Okay? I'm not going to bore you with numbers. I'm going to chart the numbers for you. So you can have a simple review of all of the numbers in Parshat Bamidbar and in Parshat Pinchas. Here are the numbers. Okay, you're on the source page. This is the Mifkadim Bamidbar, and this is the Mifkadim Parshat Pinchas. They're both in the same book, but the difference between the census in Parshat Bamidbar, chapter 2, and the census in Parshat Pinchas, the difference is 39 years. right? The census in Bamidbar was year 1. The census in Pinchas is already it's after the story of Baal Peor. And if you look at the numbers of the tribes in each instance, more or less within an order of magnitude, the tribes have stayed the same size. Same number of those born, new generation, more or less match the same number of those died. That's in itself an interesting anomaly. How can that be after a generation? They haven't really grown, they haven't really shrunk, but more or less all the tribes remain the same, with 2 exceptions. The 2 exceptions are, one we talked about, the tribe of Menashe. The tribe of Menashe grows, almost doubles in size, goes from 32,000 to 52,000. That's extraordinary. We talked about that. That has to do with Menashe in the story. That should not say Mishnah, that should say Menashe. My apologies for the typo. And the other mystery is Shimon. Because Shimon in Bamidbar in year 1 is 59,000, is one of the largest tribes in Israel. Shimon in Parshat Pinchas is 22,200. Over 30,000. Now, some numbers, all the tribes go down by 5 or 3 or 6. Shimon loses 30,000 of their tribe. How is that possible? And hence, Rashi and all the Mefarshim point out, which I think is clearly pshat in the story, Shimon, it would seem that from the story of the tribe of Shimon being decimated, one would have to say, Shekol Chavdalid Elef Naflu Mishivto Shel Shimon, that the entire 24,000 people who died in the plague after Baal Peor were all from the tribe of Shimon. Now, there's nothing in the story that tells me that these 24,000 people are all from the tribe of Shimon. It just says that there was a plague and 24,000 people died. Suddenly, from the numbers of the same person, literally the next chapter, the numbers tell me that these 24,000 were all from the tribe of Shimon. The tribe of Shimon was decimated. And if you ask me why it was all from the tribe of Shimon, well, the first hint is that this person who is guilty of this act with the Kozri Batsur was Zimri ben Salul, the head of the tribe of Shimon. So already I have a hint that there's something Shimon-esque in this story. What is it about the tribe of Shimon that's going on? The answer, I believe, lies in the opening sentence. Vayeshev Yisrael Bashitim. Israel, this is now the very first moment in Israel history where they are physically in the land that now will belong to them. They have traveled through the desert. They have conquered the area of Sichon. They will settle the area of Sichon. And the first effort to settle the area of Sichon is the area of Vayeshev Yisrael Bashittim. Now, it doesn't say where Shittim is and in which tribal territory Shittim is, but I'm going to take a huge guess that if the tribal territory of Reuven, Gad, and Shimon was a degel, then in that area was supposed to be Reuven, Shimon, and Gad. And Shimon comes along and says, this is where we're at home. This is our territory. This is Eretz Shittim. This is the land of Sichon. Vayeshev Yisrael Bashittim. And if they're now in Shittim, if they're now in the region, if they're now a player amongst the players in the region, then they're going to have to make nice with the locals. And how do you make nice with the locals? You turn to them and you say, okay, we want to be Baalei Brit with you. We want to have a covenant. We want to have equal status with you. We want to have lunch together. We want to be able to share together, share the land. You're Midian and Moab, you're our neighbors. We want to have a cultural affinity with you. Vayeshev Yisrael Bashittim. Vayachal ha'ana. Read, every time it says the people, read Shimon. Because that's exactly the message of this chapter. Vayeshev Shimon Bashittim. Vayachal Shimon Lisnot Moab. They began to dwell there, to settle there. They began to think we're at home. They began to engage with the locals. The local deity is Baal. That has a certain connotation. It's very enticing. But they wanted to have lunch together. They want to go to their temples, sacrifice a little bit in their temples. Eat with them, and bow down to them, play nice, be good with their gods. They'll be good with our gods. And the next thing you know, they're full-fledged participants in the ritual idolatrous culture of Baal. It took 3 steps in 3 psukim. Vayeshev, they begin to eat, they begin to participate, they begin to engage with the daughters, they begin to feel like they're part of the cultural arena because this is their home. Shimon is at home. If you look at Devarim, the beginning of Perek Zion, that is exactly what the Torah says is the danger of allowing the Canaanites a stronghold in the land to the point of being their equal. It's one thing to say that the Canaanites are in their land and Israel is in control and Israel sets the rules. It's another thing altogether to make a brit of equality with the Canaanites. And so Devarim lays it out. You enter the land that God will give you as an inheritance. God will remove many nations from before you. The Hittites and the Girgashites and the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites. 7 nations. God will give them into your land, and you will smite them. Here are the rules. You have to destroy them. You have to destroy the culture, the idolatry. Don't make a brit with them. Don't show mercy. Don't have a status of equality with them. Why not? Look at the next verse. You shall not marry them. Because a brit of equality with them will lead to social unions of marriage, and which will lead to idolatry. One thing, it's clear, these three acts, these 3 components, if you allow them to remain equal, balei brit, and you allow them to engage socially, and you allow them to engage spiritually, the end result will be that they will destroy you from within. That's exactly what happened to the people of Shimon. Vayeshev Yisrael b'Shittim. They dwelt in Shittim amongst all of the Midianites and Moabites that they are now an equal partner to. Vayeshev. So they enticed them. So they called them. They said, "Let's have lunch together. Let's engage with them." It's a men Yisrael of our poor. It took 3 psukim. It took 3 psukim to do exactly what the Torah lays out in Perek Zion of Devarim will be the sequence of events. From enabling the Canaanites to be seen as equal, Baalei Brit, you end up in their temples and you end up in the idolatry of Baal Peor. The land of Israel has to become an idolatry-free zone. That's the primary agenda. And the ones who suffered this fate were the tribe of Shimon. That's exactly where they are. They're in the territory of Shimon. That's exactly who perpetrated this crime. Of 24,000. Of whom? 24,000 Shimonites. Is clear from the census that all 24,000 were from the tribe of Shimon. And that's the story of Shimon. Yaakov saw this, understand, he saw the danger of Shimon and Levi, scattered them, separated them. But what he didn't anticipate was Levi was able to redeem themselves. Shimon, not only didn't they redeem themselves, Shimon repeats the same offense. Shimon, who was the one who made the suggestion to enter into a brit with Shechem for the purpose of not only weakening them and saving their sister Dinah, but also destroying them, going to war with them, right? Shimon then enters into a brit with the people of Shittim on the other side of the coin, hundreds of years later. And so the end result is that the the bracha to Shimon, Moshe is so angry at the tribe of Shimon for what they did. Moshe literally skips Shimon altogether, takes away their nachla, because their nachla should have been right here. It should have been in Eretz Shittim. That's exactly where they belong. The Shimon should have been here in Reuven, Shimon, and Gad. This should have been their decal. But
Where
because
is
that's
Shittim? I don't
so we
see
don't know
Shittim. Where
exactly
is
where
it?
Shittim is. It's an area. It's not a city. It's a region. But we do know they border with Moab and Midian. So it's here. So in the area where the camp of Israel is encamped, somewhere between Arnon and the Abok, because that's exactly the area conquered from Sichon in the previous story, and they're bordering with Moab and Midian, which is here along the Arnon River. So although Shittim itself is not a region that's listed on the map, it's within this area. Right here it says Evo Shittim. If you look at this map here, it says Evo Shittim.
Okay.
You see it?
Yes, yes.
It's literally, this is the area which should have been Reuven, Shimon, and Gad. But because Shimon had violated the foundational principle of the relationship with the Canaanite nations, when you enter into the land, you are the Balabatim. You may not leave the idolatrous culture intact. You cannot enter into a brit of equality with them, and certainly not a marriage with them, and certainly not a cultural draw into their region. Shimon did everything that we were not supposed to do. The result was that they were punished in the land of it, and their land was taken away. And so Reuven has no share in the territory of Reuven and Gad. Shimon has no share in the territory of Reuven and Gad. In the end, Judah turns to Shimon and says, okay, help me out in my land, and I will give you cities in my territory. And that's exactly what happens. Shimon helps Judah in the conquest of the south, so Judah gives him 5, 6, 7 cities in the south, so that what's left, 22,000, kind of a place to live. But understand that was not where they were supposed to be initially. We have enough evidence to suggest where they were supposed to be initially and why that was taken away from them as they come into the land of Israel. So in answer to the question, and with this I'll conclude, in answer to the question of why this story of Yehuda and Shimon is the opening chapter of Shoftim, right? So why is it here? Why is it the relevant beginning of the story of Shoftim? And the answer is because this is the challenge of the entire book of Shoftim. Shoftim is their struggle with the Canaanites in their midst. And the rest of the chapter will identify all the various Canaanite cultures that remained behind and the challenge spiritually that it posed to them. That's what we read in the beginning of chapter 2, when the Malach comes to them in Gilgal and says to them, don't make a brit with the local inhabitants. Don't make a brit of equality with the local inhabitants. You have to destroy the idolatry. You have to establish an idolatry-free zone. In language of today's shir, don't make the mistake Shimon made. And we're going to look at this piece of it in the next couple of weeks, but don't make the mistake Shimon made. I'll go one step further. Interestingly enough, Chazal say that the Malach here is a Navi by the name of, anybody know who Chazal identify as the messenger of this phrase, don't make a brit with them. Lo tichot lahem brit.
Pinchas.
Pinchas. Chazal link it to Pinchas. Why Chazal link it to Pinchas we'll talk about over the next, at some point in the next few weeks. But clearly from today's shir, you can understand why it's connected to Pinchas. Right? The story of Baal Peor hovers over the book of Shoftim, a shadow of a very dark moment in their past, and the threat, do not make that mistake again. That's exactly the issue with which the book begins. Okay, I will stop here and be happy to take questions.
Yasher koach, Rabbi Shulman. Yasher koach.
My pleasure. I think I said to you once before, Shoftim is not a happy-go-lucky book. but it's fascinating and it's relevant and it's powerful, but the stories are dark. Nothing
Thanks
I can
so
do about
much.
that.
Rabbi, after Chet Egel, 300 people were killed.
Chet Ego was different. Chet Ego was a small
After
number of people.
this story, 24,000.
Right? Chet Ego
And
was
I
different.
think it was the answers from last Shabbat parasha. Elkanah Hashem.
I think the answer is that it was a very different type of Chet.
Yeah. No question about that.
Chet
No
Ego
question.
was understandable. Chet Ego was immediately after they left Egypt. They didn't know any better. Chet Ego was Moshe was missing. Chet Ego was so many things to understand. And at the end of the day, there was only a handful of people involved in it. This is Vayeshev Yisrael Bashitim. Vayachal Ha'am, the people, the nation. This was national. This was a major. So that's the way it's described. What we've done is we've channeled all of that down to, okay, it wasn't national, it was tribal, it was one tribe, but it was everybody. It was that sense that this was their home. They belonged here, and therefore they could integrate.
The key
Integrating
word
with
is
the Canaanites
Vayeshev.
was never a good idea.
The key word is Vayeshev. The same
Yeah.
story, Parashat Vayeshev. When people want to settle problems. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
What's the significance of Bochin, the city of Bochin?
You mean for in chapter 2?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a very powerful question. I don't have the variables right now to answer it, but I will, Linetta. So when we look at that chapter in detail, we'll see the tears become a theme, historical theme around the issue of marrying the Canaanites, etc. But we'll look at it in detail down the road. It's a good question. If you want to write it down in the kind of a in your notebook somewhere that's unanswered questions, record it hold me to it. Keep me honest. We'll deal with it, but I don't have enough information to deal with it today.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Rabbi.
My pleasure. Have a wonderful day, wonderful evening.
Yes,
and
Isha
more
Koach,
day.
Rabbi. Very good and very interesting, and I learned a lot.
It's always my pleasure to teach you and to learn from you and to have a conversation. You be well, everybody. I'm signing off.